By January 1945, the wall was already lost for Nazi Germany. Allied armies stood on the Rhine, cities burned, supply lines collapsed. But inside dim interrogation rooms, captured German generals spoke freely for the first time, and what they revealed shocked Allied intelligence. They did not fear President Roosevelt. They did not fear Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower. They did not even fear American numbers alone. What they feared were specific men, commanders whose names caused hesitation, panic, and sleepless nights, men whose tactics disrupted plans, shattered morale, and rewrote German assumptions about how Americans fought. This is not a list of medals or political power. This is a ranking of pure battlefield fear, reconstructed from German memoirs, post-war interrogations, and operational records. From the general who ruled the night, to the air commander who erased cities, to the armored officer the Germans called the American Guderian, this is the story of the American generals the Wehrmacht truly feared. After the war, Allied intelligence conducted hundreds of structured interrogations with senior German officers, men like Heinz Guderian, Siegfried Westphal, and Hasso von Manteuffel. Their statements were compared with diaries, battlefield reports, and private correspondence never meant for publication. A pattern emerged. The Germans did not describe fear in emotional terms. They spoke of disruption, unpredictability, and relentlessness. Fear meant a commander whose arrival forced emergency redeployments, a general whose doctrine invalidated German planning, a name that altered behavior before contact was even made. They respected Eisenhower as the architect of Allied power, the man who coordinated resources so vast they seemed endless. But respect was not fear. Fear came from men closer to the front, commanders whose decisions translated immediately into artillery barrages, night attacks, armored breakthroughs, or cities erased from the air. This ranking is built on German perspective, not American legend. It reflects who the Wehrmacht dreaded encountering and why.
To rank fear, we applied 4 criteria derived directly from German sources. First, operational shock. Did this commander force sudden changes to German plans? Second, psychological impact. Did their reputation affect morale before battle began? Third, material consequences. Did their command result in overwhelming losses, air superiority, or territorial collapse? Fourth, German testimony. Memoirs, interrogations, and post-war assessments naming specific individuals. This explains why some famous names ranked lower than expected. Eisenhower commanded coalitions, not divisions in contact. His genius created inevitability, but inevitability does not terrify soldiers in the moment. Conversely, men like Curtis LeMay or George Patton produced immediate dread. One destroyed cities without apology, the other attacked faster than German doctrine believed Americans capable of. This is not about morality. This is not about admiration. This is about fear, as experienced by the enemy.
Dwight David Eisenhower was the most important American general of World War II and the least feared by German frontline commanders. German officers consistently described Eisenhower as a political general, a master coordinator rather than a battlefield tactician. They respected his ability to hold together an unstable alliance of Americans, British, Free French, and resistance movements. But fear requires proximity. Eisenhower did not order night assaults. He did not command armored thrusts or bomber streams. His battlefield presence was indirect, expressed through logistics, air power, and overwhelming supply. As one German officer later summarized, Eisenhower himself was not frightening. What was frightening was that once he decided, there was no stopping what followed. That distinction matters. Eisenhower built the machine. Others drove it into Germany. For that reason, Eisenhower stands outside the ranking, acknowledged as the architect, but not the face of fear.
The German High Command did not fear American paratroopers as individuals. What they feared was where they appeared and when. From Sicily in July 1943 to Normandy in June 1944, American airborne operations introduced a new kind of uncertainty. German commanders repeatedly described airborne drops as strategic ambushes, assaults that collapsed rear areas before the front line even moved. Generals like Matthew Ridgway of the 82nd Airborne and James M. Gavin earned German attention not through brute force, but through dislocation. Supply routes vanished overnight. Communications failed. Reserve units were diverted to fight enemies already behind them. After Normandy, German situation reports frequently overstated airborne strength, assuming entire divisions had landed when only scattered regiments were present. That confusion delayed counterattacks at critical hours. The airborne commanders themselves were not ranked among the most feared, but their method of war was. German officers admitted that once parachutes were spotted, control evaporated. Fear, in this case, descended from the sky.
The master of the night attack. In German after-action reports from Italy, one American commander appears repeatedly, often without embellishment, only irritation. Lucian K. Truscott, Jr. While most Allied commanders avoided large-scale night operations, Truscott embraced them. In Sicily and later in Italy, his units attacked after dark with speed and coordination the Germans did not expect from American forces. German doctrine relied on night for regrouping and resupply. Truscott denied them that luxury. His troops moved light, fast, and aggressively, closing distances before German artillery could respond. Prisoners taken during night actions reported shock, not at losses, but at the realization that the Americans had learned how to fight like Europeans. During the brutal Italian campaign of 1943-44, German commanders noted that sectors facing Truscott required additional reserves even when terrain favored the defense. He did not command the largest formations. He did not seek publicity. But to German officers in Italy, Truscott represented a dangerous shift, proof that American armies were no longer predictable. That made him feared.
Number 4. The unshakable professional, Omar and Bradley. German generals rarely used emotional language. When they did, it was usually to describe instability or overconfidence in their opponents. Omar Bradley inspired neither. To the Germans, Bradley was dangerous precisely because he was unremarkable, calm, methodical, relentless. In Normandy, German commanders initially dismissed Bradley as a secondary figure behind Patton. That illusion collapsed during Operation Cobra in July 1944. Bradley's coordination of air power, artillery, and ground forces produced a breakthrough so complete that German defensive doctrine simply failed. Post-war German accounts repeatedly emphasize Bradley's refusal to panic. He absorbed counterattacks, adjusted quietly, and continued forward.
There were no dramatic reversals to exploit. One German officer later wrote that facing Bradley was like fighting a machine that never lost balance. There was no reckless gamble, only steady pressure until the line broke. Bradley did not terrify through spectacle, he terrified through certainty. Against him, German commanders knew that if they lost ground, it would not be recovered. Fear does not always shout. Sometimes it advances silently every day.
Number 3. The Artillery Sledgehammer. General James A. Van Fleet. If German officers feared anything more than tanks, it was American artillery, and few men embodied that fear more clearly than James A. Van Fleet. Van Fleet's reputation among the Germans was built on concentration. He did not waste shells. He waited, and then he buried positions under fire so dense that movement became impossible. In late 1944, German reports from the Hurtgen Forest and later the Ardennes noted that sectors facing Van Fleet experienced artillery barrages of unprecedented intensity. Defensive depth meant little when every road, trench, and fallback position was registered in advance. Captured German soldiers described American artillery as mechanical, endless, and precise. Van Fleet understood that firepower was not merely destructive, it was psychological. Once his guns opened, resistance collapsed quickly. German commanders learned to fear the sound before the impact, because when Van Fleet's artillery spoke, infantry and armor followed immediately. To the Wehrmacht, Van Fleet was not flamboyant. He was final.
Number 2. The Baron of the Skies, Curtis E. LeMay. To German soldiers and civilians alike, fear increasingly came not from the horizon, but from above. By 1944, Curtis LeMay had transformed Allied air power from harassment into systematic annihilation. German post-war analyses describe his bombing doctrine with one recurring phrase: inescapable. LeMay rejected symbolic raids. His objective was industrial collapse and psychological exhaustion. Rail yards, oil facilities, factories, and entire urban centers were struck repeatedly, methodically, without pause. German air defense reports from late 1944 acknowledged the grim reality. Interception rates could not keep pace with losses. What terrified the Luftwaffe was not just destruction, it was attrition. Under LeMay's policies, American fighters ranged freely, destroying aircraft on the ground, strafing rail lines, and denying recovery. German pilots described it as being hunted continuously. One German officer later stated, "We did not fear individual American bombers. We feared the man who sent them every day." LeMay never apologized. He believed terror from the air shortened wars. From the German perspective, he did.
Number 1. The general they called the American Guderian, George Smith Patton, Jr. Among German generals, one American name appeared more often than any other, spoken with irritation, respect, and unmistakable concern. George Smith Patton, Jr. German officers did not fear Patton because of his speeches or his reputation. They feared him because he moved faster than their doctrine allowed. During the Sicilian campaign and later in France, Patton's armored forces advanced with a tempo German commanders associated only with their own early victories. Heinz Guderian himself acknowledged that Patton understood armored warfare instinctively. Patton attacked immediately, exploited relentlessly, and refused operational pauses. German units facing him reported confusion not from defeat but from speed. Orders became obsolete before execution. After the breakout from Normandy, German intelligence repeatedly misjudged Patton's axis of advance. By the time they reacted, his tanks were already in their rear. Patton did not just defeat German forces, he outthought their expectations. That is why German officers gave him a name they did not use lightly, der Amerikanische Guderian. And that is why, above all others, he was feared. When German officers finally assessed their defeat, a clear distinction emerged. Eisenhower represented inevitability, Bradley represented pressure, Van Fleet represented destruction, LeMay represented terror from the sky, but Patton represented something far worse. He represented initiative. German doctrine depended on prediction, understanding where the enemy would pause, reorganize, or wait for orders. Patton denied them that certainty. He moved before responses formed. He attacked where defense was assumed. In German after-action summaries, Patton's operations were described not as battles, but as disruptions. Commanders lost control, timelines collapsed. Fear, the Germans concluded, was not created by size or resources alone. It was created by a commander who forced constant reaction. In that sense, Patton became the face of American fury, not because he shouted louder, but because he never stopped moving. German generals consistently separated Eisenhower from the battlefield experience of fear. They admired his coalition management, keeping British, American, and Free French forces unified despite rivalries. German intelligence considered this achievement remarkable. But Eisenhower did not appear suddenly on flanks. He did not impose chaos in rear areas. He did not erase cities overnight. Instead, he created conditions where resistance became futile. One German officer summarized it bluntly. Eisenhower did not frighten us. He made our defeat unavoidable. That distinction explains why Eisenhower remains central to victory, yet absent from fear rankings. Fear belongs to those who change the immediate reality of war. German military culture valued tempo above all else. Blitzkrieg depended on speed, coordination, and initiative. That is why Patton's advance unnerved them so deeply. German commanders believed Americans were methodical and slow. Patton shattered that assumption. His advances after Normandy matched and sometimes exceeded early German armored operations in 1940. German field reports repeatedly mention loss of rhythm. Orders issued in the morning were irrelevant by afternoon. Fear followed not from losses alone, but from loss of control. And once control vanished, defeat followed quickly. By late 1944, German soldiers understood a brutal truth. The sky no longer belonged to them. LeMay's air doctrine destroyed not only factories, but confidence. Rail movement became suicidal. Daylight travel disappeared. Repair crews worked at night, knowing bombers would return. German morale reports show rising fatalism. Losses were no longer debated, only endured. The Germans did not call LeMay a tactician. They called him
inevitable. Fear from the air became permanent.
Early in the war, German commanders dismissed American leadership as inexperienced. By 1944, that assumption collapsed. Truscott's night attacks, Bradley's coordination, Van Fleet's artillery discipline, Patton's speed. Together, they represented something the Germans had not expected: adaptation. American generals learned faster than German doctrine allowed for. Fear grew as predictability vanished.
German testimony converges on one conclusion. They feared not American courage, but American capacity combined with leadership. Once effective commanders aligned with industrial scale, resistance became meaningless. Fear came when American generals stopped imitating European warfare and began redefining it.
Post-war mythology often exaggerates personality. The Germans did not fear Patton's speeches. They did not fear LeMay's reputation. They did not fear Bradley's humility. They feared results. German records remain unsentimental. Fear appears only when outcomes forced acknowledgement. That makes this ranking unusually honest.
Fear is not accidental. It is cultivated. American generals did not seek to frighten the enemy, but their methods produced fear nonetheless. Speed, pressure, destruction, supremacy. By 1945, German commanders no longer asked if they would lose, only how quickly. And that, more than any battle, marked the end.
When Allied analysts compiled German post-war interrogations, one thing stood out. Fear was rarely expressed directly. German officers spoke instead of untenable situations, loss of initiative, and impossible operational conditions. These phrases were not abstractions, they were admissions. Patton appeared most often in discussions of lost tempo. LeMay appeared in assessments of irreversible destruction. Bradley appeared in operational summaries describing steady collapse. Fear, in German records, was professional, not emotional, and that makes it more credible. Not every effective general inspired fear. Some produced decisive victories quietly. Others shaped the war indirectly. German commanders distinguished carefully between defeat and terror. Fear emerged when a commander removed options. Patton removed time. LeMay removed sanctuary. Van Fleet removed survivability. This ranking reflects not success alone, but how success was experienced by the enemy.
Even after the war, German generals continued to discuss Patton disproportionately. They replayed his movements. They analyzed his feints. They admitted misjudgments. Patton violated their assumptions about Americans, and assumptions are the foundation of planning. That psychological breach outlived the battlefield.
LeMay's legacy, from the German viewpoint, was permanence. Once air supremacy was achieved, it never loosened. Every movement became exposed, every repair temporary. German morale reports confirm it. Hope faded not after a single defeat, but after sustained bombardment. Fear settled in and stayed.
By late 1944, German commanders recognized a unified American command style emerging: aggressive exploitation, relentless pressure, operational learning. The fear was not of one man, but of a system now mastered by capable leaders. In their final assessments, German generals concluded that defeat in the West
was not caused by a single battle. It was caused by commanders who forced them to react continuously until reaction became impossible. Fear, they acknowledged, accelerated collapse.
Fear is a diagnostic tool. It reveals where doctrine fails, where adaptation lags, where leadership matters most. The Germans feared American generals, not because they were louder, but because they were effective under modern conditions. Fear exposed the future of warfare.
These men were not heroes in German eyes. They were obstacles. They forced change. They denied recovery. They shortened the war. Fear, when stripped of emotion, becomes acknowledgement. And in that acknowledgement lies the final verdict. The Wehrmacht did not just lose to American power. They lost to American commanders who understood how to win.
History is often told by the victors. Fear, however, is recorded by the defeated. If this documentary changed how you understand the war, not through myth, but through enemy testimony, then subscribe for more deep research World War II documentaries grounded in primary sources, interrogations, and battlefield analysis. And now, a question for you. Which American commander do you believe the Germans feared most, and why? Was it Patton's speed, LeMay's air supremacy, or another figure we should analyze next? Leave your answer in the comments. We read them, and they shape future episodes. If you want the next breakdown on one commander, one campaign, or one decisive moment, tell us below. Subscribe. Stay curious. History continues.